Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the network of AFR Talk, the American Family Radio Talk Network. You are listening to high definition radio, more content per cubic inch than any other place on your radio dial. At least that is our goal, to bring you the information you need to know how to think clearly about what's going on in our culture. Now, I want to start this segment by playing just an excerpt from a speech that Ronald Reagan gave. Rob Gardner, my director, grabbed this, and this is the 10th anniversary of the death of Ronald Reagan, probably the last great president that we've had in American history. Now, he wasn't perfect. I want to be clear about that. Ronald Reagan was not a perfect statesman. I mean, he signed an amnesty bill in 1986 that got us into the mess that we are in today. He signed amnesty legislation that legalized instantly 3 million illegal aliens with the promise that was going to fix the problem. We were going to secure the borders. This was going to be the end of the deal. He fell for that. Should have been smart enough not to fall for that line, but he did. He signed it. That problem has now quadrupled in size. We're dealing with 12 to 20. We got hundreds of thousands of children now flooding across the borders or having to be put up at these military bases because there's no place for them to go because they're coming across unaccompanied by their parents. Now, all of this, I think you can trace back to Ronald Reagan's weakness in 1986. So don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the guy was perfect, that we ought to canonize him, but he was a great president. He articulated a conservative message. He stared down the powers of communism, the evil empire of the USSR. He brought the Berlin Wall down. He brought peace through strength. He made America once again the most respected and feared nation in the world, the world's only superpower because of his strength and his resolve. He reduced tax rates. He produced the longest period of economic growth since the Great Depression. Jobs grew, the economy expanded, the tax rate came down, but revenues went up because of the growth in the economy. So in all respects, he was a great president. Here is an excerpt as we remember him on this 10th anniversary of his passing. Here's an excerpt of a part of what made Ronald Reagan the leader that he was.
Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government, and with three little words: we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car, and we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. We, the people, are free. This belief has been the underlying basis for everything I've tried to do these past 8 years. But back in the 1960s, when I began, it seemed to me that we'd begun reversing the order of things. That through more and more rules and regulations and confiscatory taxes, the government was taking more of our money, more of our options, and more of our freedom. I went into politics in part to put up my hand and say, stop. I was a citizen politician, and it seemed the right thing for a citizen to do. I think we have stopped a lot of what needed stopping, and I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
So as Ronald Reagan, as government expands, liberty contracts. And remember, this is really rooted in a biblical understanding of government because the scriptures very clearly indicate that government is to be an instrument of justice. That is its primary responsibility. Its primary responsibility is justice, to punish those who infringe on the unalienable rights of their fellow citizens. We need government. Government's been established by God. He's delegated to government his power, his authority in Romans 13 for those two purposes, basically justice internally and national security externally. That's the responsibility and the role of government, to keep us safe from external enemies and to punish internal violations of our fundamental unalienable rights to life, liberty, and property. God's established government for that purpose. In other words, the bottom line is that it's the bad guys that are supposed to be afraid of the government. By God's design, if government is functioning as God intended it to function, it is the bad guys who are afraid of the government. What do we have today in too many cases? In too many cases, it's the good guys that are afraid of the government. The bad guys know if they get in trouble, they'll get a court-appointed attorney paid for by us, the taxpayers, completely unconstitutional, but the Supreme Court said you got to do it. So we're paying for the legal defense for the people that ripped us off, that robbed us, that shot us, that killed us, that held up our stores, that robbed our banks. And we're forced to pay for their legal defense. Now, they've got a right to an attorney, but there's nowhere in the Constitution where it says they've got a right to have somebody else pay for it. You can have an attorney, but that's one of the things you got to calibrate before you decide to go stick up a 7-Eleven. Do I have the money to afford an attorney if I get nailed for this? But bad guys don't have to do that calibration right now, do they? They know that they're going to have an attorney paid for by the taxpayers to take up their cause in court. So anyway, bottom line here is we've got things completely upside down. Ronald Reagan understood the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. The more government expands, the more liberty shrinks, which is a biblical point of view. This is what Samuel tried to talk the people out of in the days of Saul. He said, look, you got to understand what's going to happen. You want a king? You want this guy? Here's what's going to happen. Your tax burden is going to go up. He's going to conscript your sons and your daughters for service, either in the military or in some other way. He's going to take an increasing share of your labor, your productivity. And so Samuel did the best he could to warn them about what they were getting into, and they went right ahead and did it anyway. I've got a fascinating story in the stack today. I don't think I'm going to have time to get to it, so I'll just summarize it for you right now. It's a woman down in Austin, Texas, and she went to a city. Yeah, here it is. I got it right here. I'll pull it to the top of the stack here. This is so illustrative. It is so revealing of the way that liberals think. They don't think. That's the problem. They feel. They do not think. They don't pause to consider the implications, the ramifications of the decisions that they are making today. They are short-sighted. They do things that make them feel good. They cast votes that make them feel good regardless of the long-range implications of this. Now, here's a story out of Austin, Texas. This is amazingly revealing about the liberal mindset. Austin is a very progressive city. It's the home of the University of Texas, so it's a college town. You got liberal-leaning profs running that campus and turning that into a haven for progressivism and liberalism. The progressives in Austin who continually vote for more programs and higher taxes don't seem to understand that they actually have to, pay the taxes. And that's what this little blog post gets to. Here's an excerpt from the Austin American-Statesman. This is amazing to me. On a recent evening, more than 300 homeowners who are worried about their rising property tax bills filled First Unitarian Universalist Church in North Austin. Why doesn't it surprise me that they've got a First Unitarian Universal Church in the heart of Austin, Texas, for a town hall meeting? If something doesn't change, many said, they will soon be priced out of their home. So it's a terrible thing. Their tax rates are going up so fast, property taxes are going so high that they're not even going to be able to afford to stay in their homes. Their property taxes are going to cost them more than their mortgages. 2 nights later, a similar discussion played out in South Austin, where homeowners gathered at Grace United Methodist Church in Travis Heights to talk about what can be done to slow escalating residential tax values. This is the property tax rate. I'm at the breaking point, said Gretchen Gardner, an Austin artist who bought a 1930s bungalow in the Bolden neighborhood just south of downtown in 1991 and has watched her property tax bill soar to $8,500 this year. I mean, that's, what is that? What is 12 into 8,500? That's like $700 a month. That's her property tax. That's not her mortgage. That's not her rent. That is her property tax. $8,500 a year. She says this, it's not because I don't like paying taxes, said Gardner, who attended both meetings. Quote, listen to this. I have voted for every park, every library, all the school improvements, for light rail, for anything that will make this city better, but now I can't afford to live here anymore. And then she begs people, somebody needs to step in and address the problem. And you think, mega facepalm on this deal. I mean, Gretchen Gardner, I feel your pain. I'm sorry that you're in a position where you're being priced out of your own home by your property taxes. It's a shame. It's a crime. It's a horrible thing. And I saw this happen in my home city of Boise, Idaho. I saw people that had been in their homes for years. They'd paid them off. They were driven out of their homes. They had to sell their homes. Friends of mine had to sell their homes because they no longer could afford the property tax bill. They were paying more in property taxes than they had ever paid in their mortgage payments. They just couldn't afford it, had to move out. It's a terrible thing. I don't wish that on anybody. But here, poor Gretchen Gardner, she does not seem to realize that she has done this to herself. I mean, I feel very sorry for Gretchen Gardner. I wouldn't wish her circumstances on anyone. But she seems completely oblivious to the fact that she has no one to blame but herself. She did this to herself. She voted for every tax increase that came along. Why? Because it made her feel better. It's all about feelings. I voted for every park. That makes me feel better. When I vote to raise property taxes so we can have more parks, I felt really good about that. That makes this city better. I voted for every library. I want our young children to have access to books, so I voted for every tax increase to build new libraries. I voted for every school bond issue that came along because I believe in educating our children. I voted for light rail because I believe in saving the environment from the noxious weeds that are human beings. I voted for anything and everything that would, quote, make the city better. Now I cannot afford to live here anymore. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's just a reminder of what we're up against. Is what we're up against, the cluelessness here. I mean, she still doesn't get it. She has no idea that she did it to herself. So when we advocate for less regulation, less government spending, lower taxes, we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're doing it for poor people like Gretchen Gardner who aren't smart enough to figure this out for themselves. Focal Point, AFR Talk.